In the last chapter of this tutorial, we were talking about Boolean statements. Now here's where it gets really interesting to know about Boolean statements. We're going to go into the if function, or the if statement. The if statement in Excel is one of the basic Boolean functions that you need to know, and it's one of the most widely used. Before I had said that there were very widely used functions that were average, SUMPRODUCT, sum, and product. Well, you should add the if statement to them because that's another thing that you use every 5 minutes in Excel. Okay, what the if statement does is it evaluates a condition. You remember that in Boolean logic you had conditions. You asked Excel a question. Is this equal to this? Is this greater or less than this? Well, Excel takes that condition, it evaluates it inside the if function, and if it's true, it does something, and if it's false, it does something else. That's how the if function works. Let me give you an example. This cell right here, this is going to be my cell value. And this is going to be the if result. Okay, let's say that I have a cell value which is equal to 3. Like that, I just typed in 3 in the cell value. And now let's do an if statement to evaluate if this cell is 3 or not. Okay, I'm going to start by opening the statement with an equals. You work with if just like if it were a regular old function. If. And the first parameter, as you can see here, is the logical test. That's the condition or the question that you ask Excel. What do I want to know in this case? Is this cell, E5, equal to 3? That's the condition I'm going to evaluate. If you look back at the chapter on Boolean logic, you're going to see that right here, this is an equal, it's a Boolean operator, and what Excel does is it sees if this is equal to that one. So what I'm putting here is a Boolean statement asking a question, is E5 equal to 3? Then I'm going to put a semicolon. Remember that in Excel functions or Excel statements, you always separate these parameters using semicolons. Now it might also be a comma depending on the part of the world that you're in, but in my part of the world, it's a semicolon. Just experiment once or twice, you'll get the hang of it. Now, the next parameter we need here is what to do if it's true. And this can be a formula, it can be a text string, it can be almost anything. But if this is true, this is what the function is going to put in our cell. So I'm going to type right here. I'm going to do a text string, so I need to enclose it in quotation marks. And this text string is going to say value is 3. And the next argument or parameter that I'm going to give the if function is what to do if the value is false, if the value is not equal to 3 in this case. So value is not equal to 3. And that's the end of the if statement. And I close it. And what happens is it evaluates this. It says it's equal to 3. That evaluates to true. And so the function returns the first parameter, which is value is equal to 3. If I change this to 5, it says value is not equal to 3 because obviously the condition is not going to be true. Let me show you what's happening inside the function. I'm going to take this first parameter, E5 equal to 3. That's the test that I'm doing. And I'm going to substitute it right here for the cell value. In other words, I'm just going to do the same thing that the function is doing internally, but out here so that you can see what's happening. And right here, I'm going to substitute G5 just to make things a little bit simpler. And what's happening here is, since 5 is not equal to 3, I get false, and so I get the second result from the function. See? Now, if I set it to 3, the evaluation is going to be true, and the result is value is equal to 3. Let's separate this even further so that we can really see what's going on. Value is 3. Here, I'm going to take this string, and I'm going to copy it over here. Remove those quotation marks. I don't need them anymore. You need quotation marks when you're working text strings inside a function because Excel needs to know that what you're writing here is text and not the name of a function. And that's what these quotation marks tell it. What they tell Excel is what's inside the quotation mark is text. You don't need to evaluate it to see if it's a function. If you don't use those quotation marks inside the if, let me show you what happens. You're going to get a name error probably. You got a problem with the formula. Excel just doesn't accept the formula if you don't use those quotation marks. So anyway, if it's true, you're going to do this. If it's false, you're going to return that. And there you go. So let's try another condition. Let's try and see if this value is greater than 0. And in this case, it's true because 3 is greater than 0. I'm going to change this. It's true. Evaluates to false. And if it's less than 0, for example, -5, it says it evaluates to false. I'm going to give you guys one more example, and this one's a little more practical. Let's say that we had a number, and what we were doing was getting the square root of that number. So I'm going to put a square root function here, and we're going to take this out. And what happens is this. If you guys remember from the last chapter where we saw common Excel errors, you remember that you can't have the square root of a negative number. That's a mathematical impossibility. So obviously, if a user puts a -5 here, he's going to break our worksheet because he's going to break this function because there's no such thing as a square root of -5 in this case. So what I want to do is I want to check whether this number is less than 0 if the user is putting in a negative number. So my condition is going to be, is E5 less than 0? If it's less than 0, it's a negative number. And right here, I'm going to use an if statement so that if it's a negative number, I get a number 0. Say that I don't want to warn the user or put out an error message or anything. What I just want to do is set that value to 0 as soon as it goes negative. So what I'm going to do is if G5, or I can also type if E5 is less than 0, which is what I want to evaluate. Now, I was typing G5 before because I already did E5 less than 0 here, and I have the result, which is true or false. And remember that the only thing if needs in the end is a true or a false condition. So I would take it from here if I was using G5, but for the sake of argument, let's take it directly here and do the evaluation. Is E5 less than 0? Now, if the number is negative, in other words, if this evaluates to true, I want to set this cell to 0. So I'm going to type 0 right there. And if it's true, if the number is positive, what I want is the square root of that number. So I want to return the number. And that would be equal to E5. Notice that I'm not typing equals E5. I'm just typing E5 because I already opened the function statement right here with this equal at the start. So I don't need to type this like this, you see, E5. In fact, if I type that, it would generate an error. So I'm going to close my parenthesis, and that's my if statement. As you can see right here, since the number is negative, the if result is 0 and the square root is 0. I no longer get that division by 0 or that num error here from the square root. Now, if I say 4, the evaluation is false. In other words, this number is not less than 0, and the if result is the value of the cell 4, and then square root evaluates this H5 cell right here, and I get 2, which is the square root of 4. And from there on, I can go, with whatever I want. As long as it's a positive number, I'm going to get a square root like that. And as soon as this number goes negative, I get a 0 because the if result evaluates to 0. So that's one practical use of the if function. You can use it to evaluate what a user put in a cell and decide, if the user put in a value that makes no sense, it returns it or it sets it to 0. So that's something else that you can do with the if function. Play around with it. This is a really useful and basic function in Excel. Thanks for watching this video tutorial. If you liked the video, be sure to subscribe to our channel and to visit our website, cubicleoverlords.com, for more instructional videos like this one.